Welcome back to the TCI studios. Will, we got real football to talk about. None of this preseason, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. You know, what might happen? Day one, spring practice in the books. We had Dabo before spring practice, had a ton of news.
A ton.
Then we had a couple of sixth-year players afterwards. Let's start with Dabo. I guess first thing we'll talk about is a couple of guys that are not going to be back with the football team. Blake Vincent, Justin Foster. Talk a little bit about what Dabo told us on that front.
Yeah, so first of all, we'll start with Justin Foster, defensive end. A guy that I think a lot of us thought if he could come back, probably could win his job back. But he had some issues after getting COVID-19 last year, last summer is what Dabo said, that his asthma, which he's had his whole life, it got worse because of COVID. And his allergies did as well, according to Dabo. And so, you know, he kind of struggled with that all year long, and that's why we didn't see him play last season. And, you know, so after the season was over, he wanted to come back, and he talked with the medical people and stuff of that nature, and he just kept struggling to really, I guess, you know, get back with the football shape. And if you've had asthma or anybody's had asthma, they'll know physical activity, it revs it up and it makes it harder. So, you know, it obviously became an issue. Dabo was hoping that they could maybe work through it and get him better and get him back to where he was. But
well, and it wasn't really just a medical thing.
Yeah.
The reason he decided not to come back, it was a combination of the medical situation. Right. Plus, you know, Dabo talked about just does some amazing things off the football field. Had an amazing job opportunity. And it's like, okay, do I go through all this stuff you're talking about with the medical and try to get to the point where you're better and all of that, and not take this great opportunity for this job I want, or do I just go ahead and do it? So
right, and he had to make a choice, you know, and what was in the best interest for him. That's really the way Justin said it when he released his statement later on, that, you know, this was a decision that was in the best interest of him and his family, and he felt like it was just time to move on from football. And, you know, so he's now done that, and we wish him all the best, obviously. And, you know, he had a great career. You remember 2019, he had a tremendous all ACC caliber season, and second on the team in tackles for a loss and stuff like that. And
that's a big loss.
That's a big loss, because I think Clemson was hoping to get him back, and he would really add some depth and experience into that defensive line. So,
well, if you look at, you lost Tim, you lost Niles, who transferred.
Jordan Williams.
You lost Jordan, who transferred. That's a whole lot of experience you just lost.
Leadership, guys that have played in big games and won championships and things of that nature. That's what you lose up there with those guys leaving. And, you know, it is what it is, right? I mean, now Clemson okay from a talent standpoint. You still got, you know, Tyler Davis, Brian Brzee. You still got Miles Murphy. You still got a guy named Xavier Thomas. You're okay from a talent standpoint, but you're right. The experience, you can never replace experience and leadership, and that's what you lose with those three guys. So that's a little disappointing there for the Clemson. And then that was a little one of the big news stories. And then the other one was the fact Blake Vincent, offensive lineman, who is just, man, Robert, you're talking about, he's one of those guys that just
could catch a break.
Never could catch a break. Would just, you know, get back. Like last year, he got back, played in 3 games, went Georgia Tech, was playing well, gets injured. Season's over, and now it just kind of came to, it's just so many knee injuries. It comes to a point where you want to walk later on in life. Yep. And if anybody's had knee injuries, they know what I'm talking about. And he just had to make the choice that, you know, do I want to keep risking it and get another injury that could cause me not to walk? And I think he probably made the right choice in the end. Had to be hard though.
Well, and he's going to stay around the program, going to be a student coach, so he's still, you know, he's not going to lose that football altogether, but. Yeah, it's just, you feel for the kid, because they felt like he could be a good contributor at some point if he was ever healthy for long enough.
Really talented young man.
Yep. Yeah. So those things were thrown at us yesterday. You know, a lot of talk by Dabo of just how different this offseason is. He said, you know, usually first day of spring, I'm getting all these getting all these players, new players ready, and it's like, he's like, we lost all these off-field analysts and coaches and contributors in the football program. So he said this year was so different because he's got so many new bodies in the football program from an analyst coaching perspective.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at guys like, you know, Rod McDowell left, Maverick Morris, Chancey Stuckey,
Xavier Brewer.
Cam Aiken.
Cam Aiken.
I mean, he lost 5 or 6 developer guys, as they call them, analysts, and those guys are important to the job, to the program. I mean, and what they do. So, Dabo had to bring in some new guys, some guys we've heard of. Cole Stout. We know that guy. He brought in Andrew Zhao. He talked about him, a guy who played for him at Alabama when he was coaching at Alabama, And then some other new faces as well are in that mix. So yeah, he said it was the biggest turnover from a coaching staff standpoint, not on-field coaches, because he just had really one change there, but it was a big turnover on the off-the-field coaches. He said it was kind of new experience. I think he said, he has 21 former players now that are on his staff. Coaching.
Offensive side of the football, every single coach, including the coordinator, played at Clemson.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because we're talking about C.J. Spiller. I'm sure everybody knows that out there. C.J. Spiller is the new on-the-field coach, replaces Danny Pearman, who moved over into a scouting role. Every offensive coach is, with the exception of Robbie Caldwell, is a Clemson guy.
That's true. Caldwell's the exception.
But we say he's the exception. But Robbie Caldwell grew up a Clemson fan,
right?
And so Robbie bleeds orange just like everybody else.
Maybe I was foreshadowing a little bit. One of the guys they did bring in just recently, Thomas Austin,
who's an analyst,
and we pretty much think there's a good possibility they brought him in as the heir apparent to Robbie Caldwell. So Dabo might not quite be there where everybody's a Clemson player, but he's pretty close, and he might be there next year.
It might be, and I think if not next year, definitely a couple years, right? We know because. That's why we figure that's why they brought in Thomas Austin, a guy who's like, I mean, let's be honest, Thomas played for Dabo, and it meant, go down the other end of that, right? With Tyler Grisham, Thomas Austin, DeAndre McDaniels on the staff, Miles Chavis, Miguel Chavis is on the staff. So, I mean, and there's a couple more I know I'm leaving off, but there's a lot of guys that were on that very first Dabo Swinney team, not the 08 team, but the 09 team that are on his.
And it says a lot about that. Obviously, it helps him. Those guys can recruit Clemson because they're Clemson. They bleed Clemson orange.
Exactly.
But it's also Dabo taking care of his guys, even life after football, and this is, I guess, life after the football field.
Right.
A lot of guys wouldn't do that with so many of their former players and stuff, and some of these guys don't have the same experience level as some of the guys coaching elsewhere, but Dabo feels so strongly in having his guys and having Clemson guys in there that he gives a lot of these young guys opportunities, and we see some of those guys going out to other places now, but it says a lot about Dabo.
It does. And what was it like? So CJ, we think Thomas eventually, and then Tyler Grisham. They are all from the 09 team, and they're all going to be coaches for Dabo, on the field coaches. And then, of course, you got Tony Elliott right now, the offensive coordinator, who played for Dabo in 03 when Dabo was the wide receivers coach. So it's amazing. And so it does say a lot about Dabo that, understand this, okay, Woody McCorvey, who's Dabo's right-hand man, he took a chance with Dabo, and he believed in Dabo, and he gave him a shot. Right? Dabo learned from that. Woody gave me a shot, and so Woody helped
paying it back over and over.
He keeps paying it back because Woody helped Dabo get the job on Coach Stallings' staff as a GA, and then as a coach, Woody played a big role in that. So he's what he's doing. He's like, somebody believed in him and showed that kind of interest and encouragement in him, so he wants to do the same. And it's a great story the way Dabo does it.
So you got to have played at Clemson, especially if you played with Dabo. Or you have to be an Alabama guy. If you're not,
if you're not a Clemson Alabama guy,
if you don't have a connection to Alabama, Dabo through Alabama, or if you played at Clemson, it's going to be hard to get on this staff.
It would be. It would be very hard. So I guess he did bring as a consultant Coach Ted Roof. But Dabo talked about how him and Ted are real good friends, and he's got he respects Ted a lot. Ted actually is living in the Clemson area, has got a house near Dabo, and so I think they just maybe got talking to, hey, why don't you just come and help us out? And he said he's got a boy that's kind of looking to come to Clemson one day, so so why not, right?
Well, when we saw how Terry Bowden parlayed, hey, I'm just going to come be a little helper at Clemson, and now he's back head coach, and he took a whole bunch of Dabo's guys with him.
Gave him opportunities.
Dabo
to
might
be
want to be
coaches.
careful with bringing guys that group in there because you may lose some more folks. So obviously that took a long time for Dabo yesterday to go
Yes.
through all of those changes. We talked about the other guys coming in. Justin Ross is back. That's one of the other big items.
Absolutely.
Dabo talked about, how he's going to participate in spring, but he's not going to be out there doing contact and things like that. But I think if you're a Clemson fan, you're just glad to know that he's planning on playing for Tigers in the fall and, just taking another step forward.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. He mentions he's got one more meeting with the folks in Pittsburgh that did the surgery on his spine. So he's got one more meeting there, and I think that's more of a formality, if you will. It didn't sound like that was anything big, because Dabo talked about how they're going to kind of ease him back into it, and he's going to be available. He's going to do some things, but he won't, it'll be limited practice. So in other words, he won't do the contact stuff. So don't be looking for Justin Ross on spring day except on the sideline. And if he's on the sideline, don't think anything of it. That's part of the plan. They don't want to push him into that right now. August is going to be when he takes the next big step. Getting back on the field and get that first hit in. And I'm sure nobody's ready for that.
Yeah, that'll
Justin
be a big
Ross.
day. I wouldn't want to be the guy hitting him for the first time.
No, I wouldn't either.
All right, let's move over to some of the highlights from the two players. Two players both coming back for their 6th year, Jamie Skalski, Nolan Turner. One of the highlights for me, and you wrote about it today, I believe, this morning. Skalski kind of threw some things out there that he probably wished, maybe I wish I didn't quite say it that way, but, he was asked about, guys should come back for year 6, so you're going to have a chance to have 6 ACC championship rings and playoff rings. What are you going to do with all that stuff? And he's like, those ACC rings, they don't mean a whole lot. We win that every year. That's kind of like just the end of the regular season. So
Right.
I'm sure the other ACC teams will play that the week they're going to play Clemson. Oh, these guys said this, but it's true. And he and Nolan have a chance to do something that other folks just may not ever do. 6 playoff rings, 6 ACC championship rings. As you brought up to me this morning when we talked, though, if somebody that's a senior this year decides to come back again, which they can because last year didn't count for everybody,
right?
We could see some folks match that, but that's not very likely.
It's not very likely because it's hard to say you want to play 6 years, because and I love what Dabo did. Okay, he did the mat drills, right? And he didn't have those guys participate in mat drills. He's like, these guys have done it for 5 years already. I'm not making them do it again. He treated them more like NFL players, if you will, like veteran NFL players. You kind of earned it, so you can coach through it. And so that's why it's very common to see these guys out there for a 6 year take advantage of it, because it's just, it's just not normal. It's different. These are guys, let's think about it, right, Robert? These guys are 24, 25 years old. The freshmen coming in are 18. Think about the difference in mentality for Skalski, like when he's in meetings with Venables and they're going through things and stuff. That's going to be a different experience for Coach Venables, for anybody. When Nolan Turner's watching film with the young guys, now they can be extra coaches and kind of help the young guys break things down. But it's a different role than what these freshmen are experiencing and what they're experiencing. And that's why you're not going to see it happen too often, because a lot of guys are going to say, I've done everything I could do here. I'm going to move on to the NFL or try pro ball, or as Justin Foster just did, start his own professional career in a different field. So it is going to be something you don't see very often. I don't know if we'll see it again at Clemson. We might. I don't know. Not saying, but it's definitely, this is going to be a unique situation watching these two guys.
Well, and another common theme between those two players coming back was, and it's very similar to what we heard from the Power Rangers when they came back, was we just didn't want to go out that way. Back-to-back years, losing it, fairly large margins in the final game of the season. They didn't want it to end like that. I'm sure Jamie wants to get out there and actually finish a playoff game and not get tossed, but that was a big part of it. They had talked together and some of the other guys about, let's come back and let's try to finish this thing the right way.
Yeah, as Skalski said, they didn't like the fact that they got their butts kicked. Now, he used a different word that I won't use on here, but they got their butts kicked, and it wasn't pretty. And he said that, the number one thing in football is you don't get your butt kicked. And he says physically they just got outplayed in every area, and that's not the way he wanted to go out. That's not the way he wants his final game to be remembered, that they just got outplayed. And he says that happens in football. It's going to happen. but it's just something they don't want to happen again, and they want to finish on a better note. And I get it because, you know, and then he saw Nolan Turner came in and said the same exact thing, basically, that was something that was really appealing to him too, is that they could go out on a better note and not have that memory where they just physically got outplayed by Ohio State.
All right, guys, that's a recap of a lot of the things we heard yesterday. The Tigers will practice again Friday, practice Saturday, Monday. Unless they change things, we'll be able to have somebody out there watching part of practice, and then they're going to make up those other 2 days we didn't get to cover later in the spring. So we got a ton of stuff still headed your way from all the information we got yesterday, and we got more information headed your way. Next week will be full of interviews. We got, I think, 4 days of practice with interviews, and 1 day we'll be out there. So stay tuned to TCI. We'll have it all covered for you for the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics and recruiting. Stay tuned to TCI. Thanks.